Hello my fiery friends, the Infernoman here with the hottest in budget deck technology. And for today's deck tech, join me once again as we continue to make our way through the Basically series. For those that don't know, this is a series of decks that I put together that will not require you to use a single rare or mythic to build.
Neat!
That's right. So without further ado, join me today as we continue our way into the Brawl format as we continue to make our multicolored budget decks. This is Basically Allenal. Longtime viewers of the channel know how we do it. We have to talk about the stats of the deck before we dive right in. So basically, Allenal here is going to be a Selesnya deck of white and green. You're looking at an average mana curve about 2.4, and you'll be rocking a total of 22 creatures in the deck. We have 16 instants, 9 sorceries, 9 artifacts, 10 enchantments, 1 battle, and 34 lands. Basically, Allenal, as you can see, is going to be a go-wide strategy utilizing tokens to help overwhelm our opponent and get to our victory. But at the same time, our actual commander and a couple of key cards can also sneakily get bigger on their own, so long as we can keep maintaining our huge amount of tokens we want to flood the board with. But in order to understand the strategy, let's briefly go over our commander. Queen Allenal of Ruadach here is going to be a Selesnya elf noble legendary creature. Her power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures we control. If one or more creature tokens will be created under our control, those tokens plus a +1 white soldier creature token are created instead. To put it another way, she is literally going to be an army that can, so long as again we can keep flooding the board with creatures and tokens. Now that you have a general idea of how the deck is meant to work, let's break this down into separate categories. Starting with the first category is our token generation. So with Nesting Bot here, it's a 1/1. When it dies, you just leave behind a servo token. If you get to max speed, it gets an extra little +1/+0 pump. Novice Inspector and Thraben Inspector don't technically pump up Queen Allenal's ability, mostly because their tokens are actually artifact tokens, but they still provide for us some general card value with drawing cards with clues. Usher of the Fallen here, if we trigger its boast ability, we could create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. Carrot Cake here, when it enters and when you sacrifice it, you get to create a rabbit token, and also sacrificing it means you can gain 3 life because it is a food. Clarion Spirit here, anytime we cast our second spell each turn, we get to create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Invasion Reinforcements here and Resolute Reinforcements do the same thing. They both have flash, and when they enter, they leave behind for us a token that'll help again keep our go wide strategy going. Chatterstorm here has the Storm ability, so anytime we cast additional spells, once we cast Chatterstorm, we can copy it for each time we've cast a spell before it. So this of course will be a nice way to create a giant army sometimes out of nowhere, even if it only goes off a couple of times. Spot removal technically is what Charge the Mites can be used for, but also it can create for us 2 colorless Phyrexian creature tokens. Rosie Cotton of South Lane here, when she enters, you get to create a food token. Anytime you create a token, however, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature we control other than Rosie Cotton. Scurry Oak here, anytime 1 or more +1/+1 counters was put on a creature, you get to create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. Keep in mind that with this and Rosie Cotton, they actually both create an infinite combo if they both manage to go off. Tireless Provisioner here has had landfall, so anytime a land we control enters, create a food token or create a treasure token to help us keep ramping. Battle Screech here creates for us 2 white bird creature tokens with flying, and also you could flash it back by tapping 3 untapped white creatures we control. Butterbur Breed Keeper here, while technically again doesn't provide for us creature tokens, at the beginning of our end step if we don't have one, we get to create a free food token. Sometimes that simple food token can help us stabilize if we have nothing else to do with our mana. Growing Ranks here at the beginning of your upkeep allows us to populate. Since most people don't really know what populate does, it just simply means we get to create a token that's a copy of another creature token we control. Use also Engineering here and Maha Bredegard Protector here kind of do the same thing in different ways. They both have landfall, and anytime a land we control enters, for Maja here, we have to create a white human creature token, but for Use Social Engineering, we have to create a 2/2 robot creature artifact token. Either way, both of them help us just go wide with our strategy. Maha actually also has one more extra benefit because it gives all of our creatures an extra +1/+1 pump. Our next category of cards is going to be our token payoffs for helping us go wide. So for rewarding us for all those creatures we'll get to create, we'll utilize here Johnny's Welcome and Soul Warden. Anytime another creature we control enters, we get to create 1 life with a Johnny's Welcome. However, Soul Warden also has an additional benefit because she'll gain us life for any creature that pops up on the battlefield. Alive and Well here creates for us a Centaur creature token, but realistically, you also want to use this for a single mana to gain 2 life for each creature we control. Case of the Gateway Express here is spot removal for us, dealing 1 point of damage to a target creature for each creature we have on the field. If we can solve the mystery here, we can give our whole team an extra pump of +1/+0. Woodland Champion here will get bigger because anytime 1 or more tokens we control enters, we get to put that many +1/+1 counters on this creature. Keep in mind, however, you want to maximize the value, you want to try to trigger off the tokens 1 at a time. Beauregard Mentor here is a rabbit soldier, and it has trample, but it also has asterisks, meaning that it can only get its power and toughness to go higher for each number of creatures we control. Invasion of Belladon here creates for us a 2/2 white and blue knight creature token with vigilance, but if we can however win the battle, we get to flip this and to give all our creatures +1/+1. Rumor Gatherer here with the Alliance ability means that anytime another creature we control enters, we can scry one with this card. If it's the second time it resolves, then we can draw a card. Strength of the Harvest here with enchanting a creature with this aura gives it +1/+1 for each creature and or enchantment we control, or if you need it to be, it could be a tap land in a pinch. Pledge of Unity here gets us to put +1/+1 counters on each creature we control, and we also get to gain 1 life for each creature we control. Suki Kiyoshi Warrior, she is a legendary human warrior ally that has asterisk and 4, meaning that her power will be equal to the number of creatures we control. However, when Suki attacks, you get to create a 1/1 white ally creature token that's tapped and attacking. And finally, to round out our payoffs here is going to be Alesso and Praz Acrobats from Omen Paths, a 5 mana 4/4 spider human hero with Enweb. Anytime we cast a creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature we control, and it gains flying until end of turn. The next category is going to be covering all of our ramp package, so it's going to be cards like Go Forth here at instant speed. Kit could pull out a basic land and put it into our hand, or if you can use it as a pump spell, that also works too. Mending Partings here at sorcery speed allows us to dig out a basic land and also get to create a food token. Battle menu here is a little bit more of a catch-all, so it can create for us either a white knight creature token, it can give one of our creatures a +4 toughness pump until end of turn, we can destroy a creature with power 4 or greater, or just simply gain 4 life. Birth of Meletis here allows us to dig out a basic plane, then at part 2 allows us to create a wall artifact creature token with Defender, and then finally we gain 2 life. Newfound Adventure here / Farseek along with Rampant Growth and Shared Roots all do the same thing. Basically for 2 mana, you can just dig out a land that we're going to need and put it onto the battlefield tapped. With Rampant Growth and Shared Roots, that'll be a basic land, but for Newfound Adventure / Farseek, we could dig out either a Plains if we want to, and it doesn't matter if it's a basic or not. Tangled Flora Hedron here is our only mana dork in the deck, or again, you can use it as a land in a pinch. Arcane Signet is going to be essential for any kind of multicolor deck, allowing us to tap it for 1 mana of any color. Side quest Catch a Fish here may not look like its actual ramp, but hear me out for a second here. As it reads, when at the beginning of your upkeep, you look at the top card of your library. If it's an artifact or a creature card, reveal it and put it into your hand, and then you can then create a food token and transform this enchantment into an actual land. The final payoff for it, of course, is for 3 mana and tapping it, you sacrifice an artifact and put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. Bolliged Recovery here allows us to pull out for 3 mana any card from our graveyard back to our hand, or of course it could be a tap land. Return to the Wilds here allows us to either do one of 2 things out of 3. You can either dig out a basic land, or create a 1/1 white human creature token, or create a food token, whatever you need at the time. Cosmic Rebirth here can allow us to pull out a permanent card from our graveyard back into our hand. If it's a mana value of 3 or less, put it onto the battlefield. And if you don't put it into the battlefield, just simply put it into your hand and gain 3 life. And finally, our only other mana rock is going to be Hedron Archive. For 4 mana, tap it to add 2 generic mana, or sacrifice it later on to draw 2 cards. The next category is now going to be protection and spot removal for the deck. So to get rid of our opponent's stuff, we'll use cards like Duskrose Reliquary. You have to sacrifice an artifact or a creature, but thankfully since we are going wide with both, we can then cast this for just 1 mana, and it has Ward 2. When it enters, just exile an artifact or a creature an opponent controls until this leaves the battlefield. For protection, we'll use Restoration Magic here. As you scale it up, you can either give just one of your permanents Hexproof and Indestructible, or give it that, plus gain 3 life for an extra point of mana, or for the max cost here, give all of your permanents you control Hexproof and Indestructible and gain 6 life. Swords to Plowshare here. Thankfully from Final Fantasy, this is now no longer an expensive rare. It's now just a simple uncommon. Just exile a creature and give an opponent life equal to the power of the exiled creature. Defend the Rider here, giving us Hexproof and Indestructible until end of turn for any permanent, or create a colorless pilot creature token. Royal Treatment here gives again another creature Hexproof until end of turn, and then also leaves behind a Royal Roll token attached to that creature. Kabira Takedown here will be another one of our spot removals here. Will deal damage equal to the number of creatures we control to a creature or planeswalker, or again, it can be a tap land. Ossification here is an aura that you add to your basic land, and when it does, you exile a creature or a planeswalker an opponent controls until the aura leaves the battlefield. Sedri Shelter here is going to be protection. Pick the color of your choice to protect against until end of turn, or it can just be a tap land if you need it to be. Sheltered by Ghost here is again one of our most powerful auras here. When you enchant a creature, you exile a non-land permanent an opponent controls until the aura leaves the battlefield. And of course it gives one of your enchanted creatures +1/+0 and lifelink and Ward 2. Collective Resistance here is going to be one of our artifact or enchantment hate spells, or give one of our creatures Hexproof and Indestructible until end of turn as you escalate. Heritage Reclamation does the exact same thing, but you could only pick one. You either destroy an artifact, destroy an enchantment, or exile a card from a graveyard and then draw a card. Swiftfoot Boots here, mostly for your commander here to attach to it Hexproof and Haste just to protect it, but you can attach it to whatever you need to. Stroke of Midnight here and Beast Within kind of do the same thing with just a little bit more of a scaling. In other words, Stroke of Midnight here destroys a non-land permanent, but Beast Within can destroy any permanent, and it will leave behind a token for our opponent. For Stroke of Midnight, it's just a simple 1/1 white human creature token, and for Beast Within, it's going to be a 3/3 green beast creature token. Witch Enchanter here can either be a land if we need it to be, but realistically, you want this to enter as a human warlock, and when it does, destroy an artifact or an enchantment opponent controls. And finally, at the top end of our card, Buried in the Garden here. For a 4-mana aura, you would enchant a land. When you do, exile non-land permanent and opponent controls until this aura leaves the battlefield. And finally, the other remaining cards that don't technically have a real category, it's just general utility for our deck. So we're going to use cards like Adventurer's Airship here, just a vehicle. And when it attacks, just draw a card and help us discard a card. We have Kutsil's Malamet Exemplar here, a 3-mana, 3/3 legendary cat warrior. Mostly this just turns off our opponent's ability to cast spells during our turn, which is nice to protect our game plan here. And whenever one or more creatures we control with more power greater than its base power deals damage to a player, we get to draw a card. Parting Gust here can either be utilized as a way to protect one of our creatures by blinking it back and forth, or if you gift the tap fish to an opponent, you can then exile one of their things permanently. Sun Pearl Karen here may not look like it fits into the deck, but hear me out for a second here. Use this kind of like as your protection spell. It has flash, it has flying. When it enters, you just bounce back a non-land permanent you control to your hand. If it was a token, however, we can draw a card off of it. And then finally, Zephyr Boots. So this gives one of our creatures that equips to it flying, and whenever we deal combat damage to a player, just draw a card and simply discard a card. And then finally, as far as your mana base is concerned, we are an ultra budget deck, so we're going to keep it as such. So that means you'll be rocking 12 plains and 7 forests as your basics, and all the dual tap lands we can muster up, which is going to be Arctic Treeline, Blossoming Sands, Botanical Plaza, Cresselet Heath, Fortified Village, Kyoshi Village, Radiant Grove, Suburban Sanctuary, Thornlight Bridge, and a couple of utility lands to round out the game plan here, with Broker's Hideout as one of our fetch lands along with Cabaret Courtyard. Command Tower is going to be a staple for any kind of deck like this, Demolition Field for non-basic land hate along with Volatile Vault, and finally Gold Saucer here, which we can use if we have some extra mana left over to flip some coins and hopefully generate some treasure tokens. You can sacrifice them later on to also draw some cards. But before we continue, if you do like any of the content that I do, please like, follow, and subscribe wherever you watch the content. You can support me monthly for a small amount on Patreon, where I have all of my extended bonus footage posted. We also have a Redbubble spot where you can buy merch like stickers and shirts, or for free, all you can just do also is just join our growing community on Discord. Your support helps keep this channel going. All links are in the details below. Now that we've covered the entirety of the deck, let's cover, of course, the more exciting part, which is, of course, tips and strategy to get you the most value out of this deck. In the early part of the game, depending on what your opponent is going to be using against you, you're going to want to have to adjust your strategy accordingly. You can either try to start ramping early, so this way when Queen Allenal enters, you can then start building up tokens very quickly to provide immediate pressure on the board. Or, on the other hand, if you feel like your opponent's going to take a while to build up their game plan, you can start getting some early game swings in with small tokens or some of your other small low-level creatures to start hopefully softening up your opponent, making it easier for you to close out the game in the later part. Once you get, of course, to the mid part of the game, this is kind of where you're going to have to pivot depending on what your opponent is throwing at you. If you can ideally get out your Adventurer's Airship to start drawing some cards, or your Zephyr Boots to attach to Queen Allenal, this should make it a lot easier for you to apply bigger pressure on those key creatures that are going to be really big once you start amassing all your tokens. Beauregard Mentor, Queen Allenal proper herself, sometimes other cards such as Kasuki also provide you exactly what you need to make sure you can keep putting pressure on your opponent. Don't be afraid to get some aggressive swings in to soften up your opponent's game plan, unless if they may be running some cards that you're going to have trouble with. But this is again where we get to the late part of the game, and you should now have a critical mass of tokens. By doing so, you should hopefully also have in hand either a protection spell for Queen Allenal to make sure she stays on the board, and this way you can keep building up your army of tokens, or if you held on to any of your spot removal, once you get to a point where you know you can close out the game, use those spot removal cards to get rid of key creatures your opponent has to keep the board clear and make it much easier for you to close it out. There are going to be, of course, a couple of final cards that you might want to put out there to make sure you are more comfortable with doing a big swing. Cards such as Maja Bredeguard Protector not only, of course, creates free tokens as we mentioned earlier, but also gives your creatures a +1/+1 pump, or spot removal / pump such as the Gateway Express will help you ensure you get that one creature out of the way, pump up your creatures, and hopefully close it out with one big swing. This will now lead us to the 3 key major advantages our deck has. The first major advantage we have is how flexible our game plan is. The deck is capable of going wide and big at the same time. We can also be very offensive, but also because we make so many tokens so quickly, we actually can also be very defensive if your opponent is trying to get a little aggressive. On top of that, we also have a couple of key cards that allow us to keep sponging hits by allowing us to, of course, gain a ton of life as we have more creatures enter the battlefield. This also will now lead us to second major advantage our deck has, which is how versatile our strategy is. So allow me to clarify on this. So this is kind of the same as I just mentioned with the flexibility, but when I mean versatility, it means that we can be resilient against spot removal and even wraths at times. With the way Queen Allenal works and other key cards that allow us to produce more tokens such as Maja or Growing Ranks or Suki, as the game progresses, you'll have to assume that some of these key cards that I did mention, if you don't have protection, are going to be targets for spot removal. But they can of course bounce back very quickly and just keep rebuilding a board state. Even if you do get wrathed here or there, Queen Allenal can also just be recast, and as long as you can keep producing tokens, she'll be able to practically double up your tokens very quickly and help you rebuild even after some of the most annoying of wraths. This will now lead us to the third and final major advantage our deck has, and being that we're both white and green, we have access to the best spot removal on a budget. So to clarify with this, I've shown you already cards such as your Heritage Reclamation, which can allow you to destroy artifacts and enchantments. You have cards such as Swords the Plowshare, one of the best removal spells because it exiles a creature. You have other cards that will help you exile stuff if you don't want to blow them up, such as Buried in the Garden, or you have Ossification. And you have also a lot of flexible removal that also doubles up as both pump or just, again, producing extra tokens. Cards such as your Charge the Mites, or cards such as I mentioned earlier, Case of the Gateway Express. A lot of these cards not only can clear the board, but also keep applying pressure because they pull double duty. Having said all that, there are 3 major disadvantages our deck has that we will of course address. The first major disadvantage our deck has is we're very, very weak to spot removal. I know I mentioned this earlier when I talked about key cards that you want on the field, but you have to keep them protected. If you cannot keep your Maja protected, Queen Allenal protected, even your cards such as Burrowguard Mentor, your deck is going to feel very sad. You can still of course produce tokens with many of your other cards, but it may not be fast enough to then provide the explosion that you're looking for to beat down your opponent. As long as of course you can keep one of them alive, you should be able to then put out your game plan. But of course this means those cards are going to have major targets on their back. Our second major disadvantage is any deck that has a lot of evasive creatures will also make us struggle quite a bit. You do have a lot of good spot removal in the deck, but if your opponent can go wide in the air or have a bunch of tramplers, your tokens are not going to be strong enough, even with a little bit of pump here and there, to stop every single one of them. Especially if your opponent can then overwhelm them or force us to chump block with double, triple the creatures versus one of their bigger threats. And our third and final major disadvantage is any deck that has more card draw than us will also make us feel very sad. While we do have a couple of options in our deck, being that we're white and green, we don't have the strongest card draw options. So you'll notice that I have had put in a couple of honestly jank even for budget options, such as your Adventurer's Airship or your Hedron Archive to of course ramp you out and then hopefully draw some cards in the mid to late game. But more often than not, since you're going to be spewing out a lot of tokens, you might end up in situations where you might be running out of cards, while your opponent might be able to refill their hand or just recover by just constantly outdrawing you. This means that they'll have more options in hand versus you, who's going to have to start top decking just to get an answer out. But despite all those weaknesses I just addressed right now, if you still like what the deck is trying to do and you're interested in seeing what else you can do with Selesnya colors or tokens in general, as always, I will show you on screen right now a couple of quick little snapshots of previous deck techs we've done across various formats that do a very similar strategy. If you haven't already noticed, those links have been scattered throughout the course of this video, so if you want to help me out, click on any one of those if you're interested in seeing what else you can do with this deck archetype. And with that all out of the way, here are my final thoughts that I want to leave you on this deck. If you're a fan of token-based strategies, if you're a fan of decks that are also highly versatile, and if you're a fan of a deck that can go super wide and super big at the same time, then I would say give this deck a try, and I assure you, when you manage to get your queen to enter the battlefield and make a giant army of tokens out of nowhere, you're going to have a lot of fun doing so, and you'll be very surprised at how you can pull it off on today's budget. And when you manage to blow away your opponent with a mountain of tokens from out of nowhere, I assure you, you will definitely not be disappointed. That's all I have for you today. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and just remember that no matter what you do play in the game of life, always be sure to burn bright. Later.